everyone, welcome to this week's episode. I recently took part of an art contest by a YouTuber whose content I really like, VaatiVidya. And the thematic for the contest was inspired by Elden Ring. Elden Ring is a brand new game from Software is making. We still don't know too much about it. We just got a trailer and a lot of people suspect it's going to be around Nordic mythology. So with that in mind, the theme for the contest was to try to design a boss that fits into the Elden Ring game, but pull inspiration from folklore. And for me, I played a lot of Dark Souls, so that was naturally going to be an inspiration for me. But also, I grew up in Sweden, so I wanted to pull inspiration from Swedish folklore, and in particularly trolls. It's something I never painted. I really like the interpretation of Swedish culture and how they interpreted it before, so I was looking at a lot of that for reference. And also looked a bit at Lord of the Rings, how they interpret trolls. And gathering all that, I started sketching and I was thinking like, what if it's like this giant thing that's sleeping in this open green area? It looks nice and friendly, but as you get closer, this giant thing just wakes up and you have to fight it. He's like sleeping in the ground in this giant mound. And that was the sort of idea for the whole painting, but I think we can jump into the painting process itself, so I'll see you in a moment. I started off with a really simple drawing where I just try to get some placement of where the character is going to be, where the troll is going to be, because I did want to kind of give a sense of you're fighting a boss, so I had a character in the foreground. And when I had blocked out my general layout for the scene, I went in with a layer to try and indicate where's the shadows going to be, where's the light going to be. And I dropped the opacity just a bit and then went in and did some more drawing because the original drawing was pretty rough. It had a lot of the information I needed, but I wanted to go in and draw in a bit extra. And with all this information, we established what the lighting is going to be, the general layout of the scene, and this kind of sort of helps me set myself up for success later on. In trying to solve, I always try to solve as many problems as I can in the start of an image to avoid running into problems later on. It's sort of a building process of the more due diligence you do early, the less problems you have to deal with later. In most cases, it always happens that something unexpected happens or you forget about something. But generally, like if you try to do as much planning as you can ahead of time, it tends to help later in the process. And for this boss fight in particular, since I'm using Swedish folklore and I grew up in Sweden, one thing that's very Swedish to me is like a lot of nature. I think half of the country consists of forest. I remember when you take a road trip or you take the train across the country, it's just trees and trees and trees, endless amount of trees. So it's very natural for me that this boss fight has to take place in a forest. I ended up having generally like from software games, their Dark Souls, their Bloodborne. Their games are generally very dark and much more moody, and I kind of want to push a slightly different direction with just having a bit of warmth in the image with a bit of sunlight, just to add some of my own flavors. Even though probably you wouldn't go that direction in the games, this is something I personally like and I want to give that twist into the game. Because I think you can still have an epic boss fight even though it's not dramatic lighting, it's just a bit slightly brighter lighting. But it's just personal taste. And you see sometimes I like to just go and draw on top of what I already have, putting a white layer on top of it. It's just easier sometimes to try and sculpt the form and shape it when you can just put a white layer on top and then go and draw on top of it. This is something I learned from my coworkers at work. And it's really simple. If you're trying to solve something, going in and drawing it is much quicker and more simple than trying to paint and a fix or a solve. And I'm also, as I'm working on this image, I'm trying to get the whole image to sort of level up at the same time and keep the detail consistency similar across the whole painting. And naturally for me, it's much easier if I can establish a bit more focus on the surrounding than the characters, because I'm more comfortable with environments. And I think for me, whenever you're making a painting, at least for me, it's like I have to convince myself this is going to work. I can make it. I can paint this. It's sort of like you have to buy in on the idea that you can make it. So I like to start with things I'm more comfortable with, because I wasn't too comfortable with. I'm not too comfortable with characters in general. So I like to leave that last in the image. But if I feel like I've established some sort of confidence early on, it gets easier later on in the process. And I tried to stay throughout most of the process fairly zoomed out, but I ended up zooming in a bit here. And I want to keep the greens on the troll because I would imagine he's been sleeping in the grass for a long time and he only wakes up when people are close. So I definitely wanted to keep some of the colors that we see in the environment reflected on him. Similar grass, similar greens, and the highlights, just to make it feel like he's really part of the environment, and keeping most of his silhouette dark value. Partially because it's important that he stands out from the image. We really need that contrast, because if I were to light him up or add too much detail, it might give an illusion that he's much closer in the image. Because he's pretty far, I do want to keep him fairly simple and focus on the big shapes and big reads. I just end up adding a lot more detail, focus on the character that is closer to us, because in the scene we can see a lot more details because he's much closer to the camera. And also, I was working on this boss. For me, it's always super exciting when you see something on a boss that is clearly like a unique element to them, and if you can obtain that by defeating them. And I thought it'd be cool, like what if you get sort of a mantle or shoulder pads similar to what the boss has, like some sort of green things that allows you to, in this area in particular, maybe blend in more with the environment. I'm not sure what effect this would have on gameplay, and it might cause some strange things, but I think it could add a pretty unique and cool element to this type of games. Maybe there's an area that is so many enemies that like either you have to really fight a lot and intensely to get past them, or you have to find this boss, defeat him, and then use his cloak and maybe they give you safe passage. I thought it could be a pretty cool element to just the reason for fighting this boss. I also added some shield in the background, sort of hinting that, you know, maybe other people have tried to defeat him or entered this area to fight him, but no one's really been successful to this point. And also just adding some more elements around his shoulders to try and really make it feel like he's just rising up from the ground. So with that said, we're pretty close to wrapping it up. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. It was really fun to take part of an art contest. It's been a long time. And it was so fun to try and design something from Swedish folklore. Let me know in the comment section below, have you taken part of art contest? Also, for the next video, probably going to be starting a new series, so keep an eye out, and I want to wish you a wonderful weekend. I'll see you next time. Have a good one. Bye.